Russian President Vladimir Putin hit back at Western sanctions by vowing to deepen Russia's trade ties with allies, including China, a big oil and natural gas customer since the invasion of Ukraine. Let me remind you that by introducing sanctions, Western countries were trying to push Russia to the out-limits of world development. But we will never take the route of self-isolation, Putin said in a televised speech on Thursday. On the contrary, we are broadening, and will broaden cooperation with all who have an interest in that, he added. That includes measures like ramping up natural gas sales to China and other Asian countries, creating a natural gas trading hub in Turkey, and setting the price for natural gas sales to Europe. Putin's remarks come shortly after European Union banned seaborne imports of Russian crude and slapped a $60 price cap on oil earlier this month. This is worrying news for the world economy. Already, the limitations have caused Russian crude exports to plunge, spelling trouble for the nation's economy, as crude oil is one of Moscow's biggest moneymakers. 90% of its supplies have been redirected to Asia, but at even steeper discounts, with oil regularly being sold below the level of the price cap. Make sure to keep watching to find out what effect a cheaper discount will have on the economy. Putin has rebuffed the oil price cap as stupid, and threatened to retaliate by refusing to sell Russia's supplies to participating countries. But cutting itself off from Western markets could wither Russia's economy long-term, economists say, with Russia's central bank warning that the latest round of sanctions were already economic shocks to the nation. National GDP is expected to shrink by 2.5% this year, Putin said, though the International Monetary Fund estimates a contraction of 3.4%. Still, the Russian president emphasized the country's resilience, adding that pensions and minimum wage would rise despite heavy military spending as the war in Ukraine approaches the one-year mark. Despite the objective difficulties of the current year, we will achieve positive results in reducing poverty, and next year we need to reinforce this positive dynamic, Putin said. China is paying the deepest discounts in months for Russian ESPO crude oil amid weak demand and poor refining margins, even though the effective prices refiners pay could exceed a price cap imposed this week by Western countries. The $60 per barrel cap, set by the Group of Seven, the G7 nations, the European Union and Australia, took effect on Monday to limit Moscow's power to finance its war in Ukraine, though Russia has vowed to defy it. China, Russia's top oil buyer, has not agreed to the price cap. Traders said they were doing business as usual. China's independent refiners, dominant clients of ESPO, a grade exported from the Russian Far East port of Kazmino, secure the shipments almost all on delivered basis from traders who arrange shipping and insurance, shielding the refiners from possible secondary sanctions that may result from the price cap. The light sweet crude is favored by Chinese refiners due to their proximity and the oil's high middle distillates yield. But the Chinese government's zero-COVID policy has weakened the country's economy and demand for crude. They, independent plants, don't really care about the price cap. All they do is crunch the numbers to see if the delivered prices make good profit or not, said a trading executive. Domestic refining margins are still struggling, the executive added. On Thursday, there were still 2 December loading cargoes unsold, and offers had fallen to discounts of around $7 to $8 a barrel, 2 trading sources said. Traders said ESPO's cheapness could soon attract fresh buying from Chinese buyers on hopes that Beijing's relaxation of pandemic controls over the past week could reignite demand. It could be expected that some buyers of Russian crude might take a cautious approach in the first few weeks, reducing imports until the legal implications of such trade are clearer, said an energy analysts. With the price cap in place, China, India, and Turkey could have more bargaining power, the analysts added. In Shandong, a province with many independent refiners, ESPO is also facing increasing competition, particularly from Iranian oil, which traded at a discount of nearly $10 against ICE Brent last week. Tanker tracking specialist Analytics estimated that Chinese imports of Iranian oil, passed off as supplies from such exporters as Malaysia and Oman, may have hit a monthly record of nearly 4.7 million tons in November. Now let's look a few months back. China's energy imports from Russia, including coal, oil, and natural gas, have reached $60 billion since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. China has become Russia's biggest energy client alongside India, with both countries refusing to join the Western sanction push against Moscow and instead opting to continue doing business and forging closer political ties with Russia. Crude oil imports from Russia into China rose even in October when overall oil imports were down by almost 5%. That's because Chinese refiners, like those in India, are preparing for the European Union embargo on Russian crude, which enters into effect on December 5. Once the embargo kicks in, the EU will no longer provide shopping, insurance, and financing services to third parties that want to buy Russian crude unless they buy it at or below a price that has yet to be set by the G7 under its plans for a price cap on Russian oil. The cap aims to curb Russia's oil revenues while keeping Russian oil flowing into international markets. In addition to more oil, China also imported more Russian liquefied natural gas in October. At 756,000 tons, the volume was markedly higher than LNG imports same time last year, and the increase came despite a 34% decline in overall LNG imports. Coal imports in October were 26% higher than last year, with coking coal imports specifically up threefold from a year ago. Coking coal is used in steelmaking. The total value of these energy imports hit $7.7 billion in October, which was $100 million higher than the value of September energy imports from Russia and $2.3 billion higher than the value of Chinese energy imports from Russia for October 2021. Russia has for the first time emerged as top oil supplier to India, replacing Iraq as refiners last month snapped up oil from Moscow, fearing a price cap from December 5 could hit supplies and choke payment avenues, data obtained from trade sources showed. India's oil imports from Russia rose for the fifth straight month, totaling 900,000 barrels per day in November, up 4% from October, the data showed. The group of 7 nations, Australia, and the 27 European Union countries have imposed a price cap of $60 a barrel on Russian seaborne oil from December 5 as the West tries to limit Moscow's ability to finance its war in Ukraine. The price cap plan calls for G7 countries to deny insurance, finance, brokering, navigation, and other services to oil cargoes priced above the price cap on crude and oil products. Russian oil accounted for about 23% of India's overall import of about 4 million bpd oil in November, the data showed. India's overall imports in November declined 11% from October on lower purchases by Russia-backed Indian refiner Nayara Energy, which had shut its 400,000 barrels per day refinery for maintenance during the month, the data showed. India, which rarely used to buy Russian oil because of costly logistics, has emerged as Russia's second biggest oil client after China as refiners snap up discounted crude shunned by Western nations since the February invasion of Ukraine. Last month, India's oil imports from Iraq declined to the lowest since September 2020, while that from Saudi Arabia plunged to a 14-month low, the data showed. Indian refiners that were initially wary of placing orders for Russian crude for loading post-December 5 have resumed purchases from Moscow as sanctions allow direct payment for Russian oil, sources said. Higher purchases of Russian oil dragged down Indian imports from the Middle East, and member nations of Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries declined to the lowest ever in November, the data showed. That's it for the news today. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe to not miss the latest geopolitics news.